The theme of today's conference, as you're aware, and I won't take very long because I'm very much interested in listening to what the other speakers have to say about it. The theme of today's conference is celebrating women leadership. And we have some ahadith which says that the nation that hands its affairs to the women will surely perish. Now, interestingly, the person who narrated this hadith fought in the army of Hazrat Aisha. So if he really believed in this hadith, he would not have fought in an army where the commander of the forces was a woman. Quran actually praises women for being politically and socially active. Two women, we have examples of two women. Hazrat Asiya, who has been praised for speaking out, politically speaking out against the injustices of the Pharaoh. And we also have the example of Queen Sheba, whose kingdom was based on humility. We have the glorifying example, and I would like to draw to your attention that Lady Mary, as you know, has been mentioned in the Quran 34 times. Whenever Jesus has been mentioned in the Quran 34 times. But he's always been called Isa ibn Maryam. Isa ibn Maryam. Why? Because up until the time you understand the infectious patients and the struggle of Mary, you cannot understand Jesus. And what is even more interesting, and I would like to draw your attention to this, is that there is a verse in the Quran which is known as Surah Anbiya, the verse on the prophets. From 51 to 90, there is a whole host of messengers that have been mentioned. And in that list is mentioned Lady Mary. So why, despite such a clear proof, she has not been declared a prophet in her own right is for the theologians to answer. We have the glorifying example of Hazrat Hajar. Seemingly she was a black slave woman, but the only, in our eyes, the free emancipated woman, the only one who's had the honor to be buried in the Kaaba. From the line of Hajar comes Syeda Fatima, Salamullah alaiha. We have always been told, tragic Mary, tragic Fatima. But what we want to dig out is this gender-based nepotism. We are talking about the leader Fatima, who at the age of 5 defended her father. People would throw animal placenta on her father and she would come to his defense. Do women have a place in politics in today's Islam? Women may not have a role in politics in today's Islam. But in the Islam of Muhammad, I did not hear a salawat. Woman was the brand ambassador of Islam. You can see from the verses of Mubahila how she became the witness of Islam.
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to share with you. My chosen woman, or should I say women, because they are sisters, Martha and Mary. Martha and Mary. I was told that I could share something about a woman in the Bible, in my Holy Scripture. And I chose Martha and Mary. The story of Martha and Mary is that Jesus visits with them, and Mary decides to sit at Jesus' feet and simply to listen to him. Martha, on the other hand, decides that it's time to clean the house and prepare the meal and do all those things. And then she gets very upset because Mary is not helping her. And she actually goes to Jesus and asks Jesus to tell Mary to come and help her. It's not fair. To which Jesus' response was that Mary had chosen the best of the deal in terms of sitting and listening to him. The story of Martha and Mary reminds me very much today of women in our society, in our churches, because very often we fail to understand exactly what our role is. We sometimes clash with each other instead of enabling each other, giving each other permission to be either sitting, relaxing, listening, or doing other things that we think should be done. You see, it doesn't have to be an either or. We can all embrace whatever gifts that we have been given. We can all embrace whatever it is that we think that we are being called to do. It doesn't mean that that's all we've been called to do, because it can mean that later on down the line we change roles. You heard at the beginning that I am here in Parliament, and I'm also a parish priest in Hackney. I don't really think of which one do I prefer, because I simply see it as a place where I'm called to be. And so this morning I was here leading prayers, and then I went back to the parish to do work in the parish, to see people, and then I'm back here again, and we'll go back later on. So I think the challenge for us as we look at women in leadership, women within our various religious bodies, the challenge for us is how do we enable one another to become what we need to be in that place, at that time, at that moment. How do we encourage one another? How do we nurture one another in the roles that we're called to play at that particular moment? So I love Mary and Martha, and I hope that I will continue to, from time to time, be Mary, and at other times be Martha. Most of the time it feels as if I'm juggling between the two as I rush backwards and forwards. But the challenge is there for all of us to nurture each other in the roles that we're called to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here. The 6th annual conference, I'm one of the onlys who's been here on every one, and it's great to be here. We do follow Sister Rubab, there's no question about it. More and more, women are taking the lead in every aspect of modern life. In the United Kingdom, I don't have to remind you that our monarch has been a woman for most of the last 200 years. Not the same woman, of course, you remember. In Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto was one of the most influential and effective prime ministers, if not the most. In my native United States, many of us eagerly anticipate the presidency of Hillary Clinton. Both Lord Ahmed and I attribute to our mothers most of that which we like most in ourselves and each other. I have fantasized here in this room, in the past, publicly, about how his mother and mine are celebrating in paradise that their sons are working together down here on this planet to bring our Abrahamic religions together in peace on earth. This conference is a tribute to women. It was founded and is driven by an incredible woman, Rubab Mehdi Rizvi, my adopted spiritual daughter, wife of my dear friend Saeed, and mother of my honorary grandson Shiraz. This conference gathers women of every background who celebrate being modern women, who take religion and social responsibility and leadership seriously. I delight in the presence this year, the first time this conference, of the most important person by far in the sweep of my life, my beloved wife Sue Ellen, who's sitting toward the rear. She has taught me over many, many, many years my most important lessons about women, but also she has taught me about men and about the ways men and women can relate to each other in sacred partnership. In every generation, the women of our religious traditions have been called upon to lead their people into a new world. To do so, they have had two exceptional and necessary qualities of leadership. First, they are extraordinary personalities in their own right. And second, they have an amazing capacity to teach the importance of our need for relationship. These two qualities combine together to make them uniquely able to nurture the possibility of a new future where justice and mercy can spread throughout the world. In the Jewish tradition, the matriarchs were just as significant for the development of Jewish culture as the patriarchs. Hence, just as Sarah ensured that Isaac would be the progenitor of the next generation, Rebekah ensured that Jacob would. Rachel and Leah increased our numbers and began the process of turning a family into a viable community. Though they are all known as the wives and mothers of men who will bring a new way of life to the world, they too had to be prepared to travel far from their own familiar worlds to be helpmates for their husbands and teachers for their sons. They were a protective group of women who ensured that the future of justice and equality could flourish. In the Christian tradition, it is Mary, the mother of Jesus, who is selected to be the mother of Jesus and to raise him in the way of righteousness. She is an integral part of Christian salvation history. Not only did she flee to Egypt to save her son's life, but she was instrumental in showing Jesus the need for the first miracle he ever performed. And when he was crucified, she suffered with him, giving Jesus to God so that his mission could be completed. She is first among the Catholic saints and considered a queen by grace, her relationship to Jesus, and by singular election. In Muslim tradition, Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, was particularly important because she was not only daughter to Muhammad, praise be unto him, but also wife to Ali, praise be unto him, and mother to Hassan and Hussain, as well as two daughters, Zainab, a heroine of Karbala, and Kulthum. Thus she was known as the complete woman because she modeled the actions of daughter, wife, and mother. She is said to have inherited the wisdom and willpower of her father, was devoted to her husband, gave to the poor, and taught her children in the way of righteousness and piety. In fact, just as Muhammad was an example for all men, Fatima was an example for all women. In conclusion, it is a difficult thing to create a new understanding of the world, which we so desperately need to do, one that involves nurturance as well as judgment. Men alone cannot do it. Although we live in a world that assumes that relationship diminishes individuality, women exemplify the awareness that the relationships in our lives create meaning and make life worth living. The challenge before all of us is to forge the partnership between men and women, which combine relationships, family, society, and the eternal values of our sacred traditions. Thank you.
Women, leadership. This ought not to be a contradiction. It ought to be recognised that women have the capacity for effective and sensitive leadership, given the right education and a chance to develop. The process of female empowerment is slowly developing, but we have a long way to go. Freedoms like this are still only a dream for millions of my sisters around the world, and the statistics demonstrate a worryingly low number of women in leadership positions in businesses today. I'm fortunate enough, as a young person, to work with two charitable organisations, St John Ambulance and Girl Guiding, where I help young people, particularly girls in Girl Guiding, to develop, helping them become young leaders themselves one day. However, roles and titles can be just that if the cultures that we live in don't accept women and young people for what they are, don't recognise their potential, don't accept that they are different but have so much to contribute to society. The way to tackle this, I believe, is education, working with young people to offer them a brighter future. If you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a family, according to the saying. Educate a man, and we can tackle these stereotypes. Educate women, and we can allow them to develop, allow their families to develop, allow them one day to unlock the doors that will lead them through their lives and become leaders, be inspirations to us all. For myself, Malala is a fantastic inspiration, as I am sure she is for many of us. To take a stand in your home country is brave enough. For a female against such opposition, even more so. For a young girl of only 16 to take on so much, to escape with her life, and then to continue spreading her positive messages of love, education, and togetherness is astounding. For me, she epitomises not just female leadership, but leadership in general. I believe that a leader should have perseverance, inner strength, courage, setting a good example. Perhaps some say women have different leadership qualities to men, interpreting evil or opposition differently, seeing it more in terms of hurt or offence, rather than flagrantly disobeying rules. But this gives women a more compassionate outlook on leadership, which makes them ideal candidates for leaders and should not then be discounted. Some believe that women are naturally subservient or obedient to men, which does not make them suitable for leadership. Yet Mary, in the Christian tradition, showed obedience to God's call by agreeing to his plans for her to bear Jesus despite the hardship she knew she would face. And so, her obedience is not a sign of weakness, but one of great strength, of self-sacrifice and inspiration to us all, a reason why she has become an inspiration and a leading female religious figure. Again, I believe in other Abrahamic and indeed other religious traditions, there are females who we can look to be inspired because of their courage and self-sacrifice, in ways that we should not see this obedience as a sign of weakness. However, leadership does not need to be on such a grand scale. Female priests today demonstrate religion is moving forward. Females in their communities as leaders demonstrate they can make a difference on a small scale. All religions preach love. Under these circumstances, our gender becomes almost unimportant. In the Jewish Talmud, it is said, whoever saves a life is considered in Scripture to have sustained an entire world. In the Quran, there is a very similar teaching. In Christianity, God says, love thy neighbour as thyself, and so we should look beyond gender, look beyond our differences to work together. I believe that we are moving forward. There are more women today in positions than ever before. I believe that God created us, both male and female, to walk this earth and do good in the world. So we should be given opportunities as young people, as women, to help make the decisions that will ultimately affect us, and we should make use of every opportunity. I believe that education is the key to life and the greatest tool to empower us all, especially women. And I believe that one day, for my sisters around the world, this will no longer be just a dream. Thank you.
I came here with a completely different speech, and I'm going to go off it and talk a little bit about other things. But my lords, ladies and gentlemen, when Rubab rang me out of the blue to invite me to this interfaith conference, and I had never heard about it before, to honour the life of a remarkable woman, Lady Fatima, I was so captivated by Rubab's voice, her evident enthusiasm and her progress in highlighting the contribution that women make in society. I mean, how could I say no? I've got another event to go to, so it was very important for me to come here. Now, women, sort of, whether in the religious field or in the home or in the workplace or leading organizations, you know, that actually change society for the better or improve, you know, inequality, you know, are very, very important. You know, we women have a very important role to play. But we were talking about some examples of women that have perhaps inspired, you know, each one of us. And when I was growing up, you know, of course, you know, we had Indira Gandhi and we had Benazir Bhutto, and my dad had lots of Benazir Bhutto's books and his father's and her father's books before him. And so I was very encouraged by these women taking very strong and very visible, charismatic leadership roles within society, which were essentially very patriarchal still. So women were making the changes happen, but in a very patriarchal society. And I came from a very small village in Punjab. You know, I came to England when I was 8 years old, and my boundaries were just basically my home and my little village school, and you know, and my home, you know, and being protected in my home. And I had no idea what the real world was like. And it wasn't until I actually came to the UK that you know, I was just exposed to lots of things here. And coming back to, you know, some of the religious sentiments that have been expressed here, you know, about Hinduism and Christianity and Islam and so on. I mean, I grew up, you know, having a faith and a religion, like a lot of us, because faith and religion is very important to a lot of the Asian diaspora, the Indian, Pakistani groups. And I was taken on a Sunday to the local Guru Ravidas Gurdwara. Guru Ravidas is not mentioned very much, I suppose, or maybe not publicized that much, but Guru Ravidas was from a community that would be regarded as untouchable. And he was very significant because he was part of the Bhakti movement, which basically looked at you know, devotion and prayer and meditation as a way to God. And I think we all relate to that, actually, in whichever religion we're in. But a lot of his verses were actually included, or are included and available in the Granth Sahib Ji, you know, the book, and the Holy Book. And there is one verse that always, you know, I feel drawn to, and that's the verse called Beganpura. And basically, it's, the free translation would be, Beganpura is a land without sorrow. There is a key sentiment within it, and the key sentiment is that I intend to dwell in one where there will be equality, social freedom, no sins, no punishment, no worries, and no sufferings. And these lines are actually reflecting both a sense of poverty and caste-based discrimination, humiliation, and the desire to find a utopia without suffering. And we could all relate to that, you know, a society without any discrimination and so on. And there was one woman, actually, during this time who followed Guruji around, called Mirabai. And she was known to have been a princess, and she moved all the way to follow him around and actually listen to his teachings and spread his knowledge and his work. So, I've been inspired by her, as well. We had an excellent speaker there, and it's really, really encouraging to hear this, someone so young and so knowledgeable. I've worked in the civil service most of my life until I left a couple of years ago, and I really wanted to feel that I had a voice outside of the civil service. I think, when you're a civil servant, you're reduced to, basically being very objective and not being able to be vocal about anything. But for many, many years before that, I've actually been working with a number of organizations on equality issues, on caste-based discrimination issues that had affected the community here. And while I was in the civil service, you talk about, sort of women in leadership. There were very few women in leadership. I was used to kind of walking into a room with mainly men around the table. And if women did progress, there were very few of them that did. So I was up against not only a pretty male-dominated work environment, but also being an ethnic minority Asian woman as well, so I was kind of almost doubly disadvantaged, I think, throughout. But I did, I feel like I did quite well, and I really felt that all the skills that I acquired while I was working, just equipped, and they're basic skills, policy making, good communication skills, networking, and all of those sort of things, are those skills that are required if you want to set up any organization or any movement for change, for them to organize themselves to progress and achieve the goals that they need. And so I started working with a number of organizations, and now I'm, as you say, I'm working with a number of organizations that have done quite well. So I'm being pressed to finish very quickly, but basically what I want to say is that there is a gender imbalance, whether it's in the public sector, private sector, or whatever. But as a woman, I believe we can be as vocal on the picket line when we want to make change happen, but also bring a sense of calm and considered debate to the table. And that's not only in the home, but outside the home. And the latter certainly comes naturally, that calm and considered debate to women, because we juggle so much. We manage our homes, we manage our money, we manage our children and our grandchildren. I mean, I'm a grandmother. And we look out for the welfare of our close and extended families, and we juggle day jobs and our home on a daily basis. And the many women that I'm really, really privileged to sit here with today, likewise make a very, very valuable contribution, and just like the young lady over there, will do great things. And dear, I just want to end, dear Rubab, events like these that celebrate women's achievements are critical to women's progress. And thank you for listening to one woman's voice. Thank you.
Emma, your turn.
Thank you. I'd like to agree with many of Reverend Rose's statements. I do believe that for women perhaps trying to argue from a Christian background, men and women are equals. Well, some Christians believe, well, Eve was made of Adam's rib, so therefore women are inferior. But I agree that the church and perhaps religion in general might need to unpackage those teachings that we have within the culture, escape from those restraints, and just take the message and move with the time. I also think that the children of today are our future leaders, and it is difficult to get a message to children without allowing women to fulfill. So women are naturally teachers, I believe, and they have become stereotyped in these roles because they are good at that. So we should allow women to become teachers, we should allow women to do whatever they would like, but we shouldn't ask them to, it's not a question of superiority, because we cannot ask them to fulfill the role of men. A question of superiority arises when you are asking two people to do the same thing. You cannot compare female leadership to male leadership, I believe. Talking of Margaret Thatcher, appropriate perhaps for our location, during the Falklands War she had almost a maternal response which perhaps most men wouldn't quite have understood, which isn't a superior response at all. It's just different, and it endeared her to some of her public because of her different style of leadership. So I think that women should not be afraid to be different, should not be a question of being superior, but being a question of who they are. So you cannot compare chalk and cheese. You cannot compare male and female because we are not trying to fill men's shoes, so we cannot be compared. So I believe that we should be allowed to fulfill those roles, which we always have done, but also take a step beyond, if we so wish.
Thank you, Rama. Thank you.
I am known by all of those who know me as an iconoclast, so there is no reason to change. Therefore, personally and professionally, that is what I do. Now, usually, in majority of traditional religious sources, and I'm including all religions and faiths at this stage, forgive the cheek to do that. As I said, traditional religious sources and traditional gatherings today, women are celebrated only as daughters, wives, and mothers. They seem to have no independent role of their own. It seems that in any kind of leadership, they are absolutely negligible or not to see. This outlook, allegedly set in stone, is not necessarily always correct. Rather, I would argue that this has been due to socio-historic processes of a time, as well as tribal customs of a certain geographical area, not to mention the good old truth that they were all written by men. So naturally, they are from the perspective of men. As one of my biblical teachers used to say, what would happen if the fish wrote the Bible? They would only include chapter 5 of the Genesis, beg your pardon, day 5th of the creation, because that's the day God created the fish. So if you write from your perspective, that's what you're going to say. Now, in Islam, and I grew up in Iran, Hazrat Fatima Zahra, the Prophet's daughter and only surviving child, is the second most significant female, the first one being Hazrat Khadija, his wife, that seriously challenges the mode that women can only be active in society and history as being daughters, wives, and mothers. We have heard from this, from all the speakers, and my time is short, so what I have done is I have chosen someone equivalent, in my opinion, from the Jewish Bible. And the person is Rebecca. And we have rabbis here, so I have to watch my P's and Q's, what I say. We first meet Rebecca, who is the wife of Isaac, Hazrat Ishaq, in Sephron Takwin, in Genesis chapter 24. Abraham and Sarah, the parents of Isaac, don't want their son to marry a Canaanite daughter because they are idol worshippers, so they ask their senior trusted servant to go to their own family and seek a wife for their husband, Hazrat Isa. The servant comes to the well, and just outside the city, it is dusk, so he prays to God and says, whichever of the girls who come to collect water and shows me kindness by giving me water, they will be the right bride for my master's son. Rebecca duly appears. The servant asks her if she would draw another pitcher of water and give some to him. Rebecca boldly answers, not only will I give water to you, but I will also draw water for your camels. Now, the servant had 10 camels with him, and those of us who come from the Middle East and know anything about the camels know how much water a camel will drink. So Rebecca was not only emotionally strong, she must have been quite a powerful puller of water. It takes a lot of water to feed camels. This action of Rebecca not only marks her character as a symbol of generosity towards a stranger, because the servant was a stranger, a major ethical commandment in Judaism, repeated over 100 times in the Bible, but it also shows her kindness to animals, another commandment in Judaism. In other words, a woman who symbolizes major ethical approaches in Judaism. Next, Rebecca invites the stranger to her parents' house and asks him to be a guest. Another bold decision by a young girl, which is based on what Abraham did when he invited strangers to be his guests in his tent. Eventually, it transpires that her parents are the right people, and so the servant of Abraham asks for her hand in marriage for Isaac. Family agrees, but they say, could Rebecca stay a few days longer before she comes? The question is put to Rebecca, and as a young girl, she stands up, not only agrees to the marriage, but says, no, I will go with him. Straightforward. So once again, Rebecca demonstrates independence of mind, as well as making the decision to decide her own future, going from one country to another country with a stranger, something we don't usually hear being given the women in traditional sources the right to do. The next, I want to talk about the episode of meeting of Rebecca and Isaac, because it is so beautiful. It is dusk. Isaac is in the field outside the city, as he was a shepherd. Rebecca's caravan approaches, and the text tells us, and Rebecca lifted up her eyes and saw Isaac and fell off her camel. The biblical interpreters tell us this means she immediately fell in love with him. Now that is half the answer. The next is the sentence which says exactly the same, and Isaac lifted up his eyes and saw her and loved her. So Rebecca mirrors the physical love of a man for a woman, something quite bold to do in traditional sources, let alone in some religious circles today. Interesting to note that Isaac never married another woman, either while Rebecca was his wife or after her death. In fact, Isaac is the only monogamist man in the Bible. I shall finish by saying what happened when Rebecca eventually became pregnant. She's pregnant with twins, and in much pain, as it says the text. They struggle with each other within her. So what does Rebecca do? She doesn't go automatically to the women of the household. She doesn't go to her nurse. She doesn't even go to her husband. What does she do? Quote from the Bible, I shall go to inquire from God why this is so. In other words, Rebecca is a woman that makes decisions, leaves on what the decisions she has made, and goes for it. She goes to ask God, and God answers her. So it says, after Rebecca asks God, and God said to her, 2 nations are in your wombs, and later Rebecca gave birth to twins, Esau and Jacob. My 5 minutes is up. As the medieval scholars, both in Jewish and Muslim tradition, say and write, those who need to understand will understand. And I end at this. Thank you.
The creation and everything in it was, I believe, created in order to have a joy in difference. And if we look around the room, today is a real blessing by bringing such different people from different backgrounds together to talk, to celebrate, to move forward in ways in which we can celebrate women's achievements, but also their unique contributions to the world. And in the New Testament, in Paul's letter to the Ephesians, it says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, but a gift from God. And I believe that faith is everyone's. Everyone has faith, can have faith, and that is a gift and one to be cherished. And it does not, God lavishes grace upon people, and it does not matter who that person is, and is not does not give less grace to women than to men, but gives grace to everyone in equal measure. And we move through our lives with our own unique experiences and pains and joys and our own gifts and talents that need to be put into, basically into the, our life stories, and utilize our own gifts and talents as God has given us to the best of our ability. And that it becomes our vocation, and whether that is within the church or within business or the law or teaching medicine, then all people ought to have the opportunity to utilize those gifts and talents to the betterment of society and be able to go to the limit of their ability as well, without having what has traditionally been called a glass ceiling. And aspiration ought to be part of the equation. So within the church, I want to be able to look at young, bright-eyed, faithful girls and to say, you have the ability to progress within the church and become deans or bishops, and that there is no difference in men's and women's gifts and talents. And so I believe that within religion and within the churches, that we all ought to be able to use our gifts and talents for the betterment of society and to progress the ends of love, which is the fundamental aspect of all of our faiths, that we want to be able to love one another to the best of our ability in our own unique way. And so I thank the committee for allowing me to speak, and that within our own unique journeys, together we make a beautiful whole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Syeda. Thanks very much, first of all, for having me. I'm really delighted to join you all here today. I begin in the name of God, the most merciful, the most kind. It's been really actually inspiring so far, just listening to everybody else's short speeches. So thank you for all sharing your wisdoms from the same essence flowing through different rivers, paraphrasing through me there. So I'm honoured, as I said, to join you here to celebrate the significant and yet often downplayed role played by women within our various religious traditions. Speaking from within my own religious tradition, that is Islam, women have played critical roles in the development of the faith, its teachings, its elaboration in the form of jurisprudential theorizing. And despite having inspiring role models to hand from among the earliest generation of Islam, their contribution has been systematically downplayed, and within a very short period of time relative to history, women were once again marginalized, excluded from key institutions of power and learning, and relegated to the domestic sphere through theological justification. In order to reverse a trend according to which religion often feels like a male sphere in which women are a mere afterthought, we must resurrect these empowering female figures, highlight the multiplicity of roles they've played in various spheres of life, and challenge the male monopoly on sacred knowledge, starting by acknowledging the debt we owe women in our understanding of religion. Some of the most influential male thinkers within Islamic theology were taught by female scholars, and yet we find that while their names are common knowledge, the female teachers are often forgotten from our manuals and our collective memories. The first university in the world was constructed by a Muslim woman, Fatima Al-Firhi, the Qarawiyyin in Fez, and yet today, in many parts of the world, women still struggle to receive the most basic of educations, and as we saw in the case of Malala, in the case of these young girls in Nigeria, it's still sadly contested by many. The Oxford-based theologian Sheikh Akram Nadwi has himself compiled the names and biographies of over 8,000 female scholars, many of whom travelled far and wide in pursuit of knowledge and teaching. We could list many Muslim women who are fantastic role models, but to list just one, Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who was a model described by those around her as the personification of high virtues, who cared fastidiously for the poor and the hungry, and offered a model of balance and humility, a woman who managed her spiritual life through regular attendance at the mosque and activity in her community, her worldly commitment in the form of care for the injured on the battlefield, for example, and her family responsibilities, whereby her devotion to those around her was widely commented on. To many Muslims, male or female, she is an important reminder of the responsibilities we owe to those around us, both in terms of our family and wider society. My own work within my community is about reminding ourselves of our heritage, of the powerful female figures in our history and our present, and highlighting our collective debt to them. In doing so, I certainly hope that the next generation of Muslim women feel that they have figures of faith to aspire to, that they will look at the sacred as a sphere in which women are not only welcome, but an essential asset to. Thanks very much for listening.
It is an honour for me to be here today, and I've just been thinking about my small sphere of influence in my work and the role that women play in that. And I didn't actually realise, because I take it for granted because I'm working there every day, but currently the director of public prosecutions in this country is a lady born in Scotland. The chief prosecutor in London is also female, and of the 5 advocacy managers in London, of which I am one, 4 of us are female, so I think we're doing pretty well in my little area. What I want to do is read something to you that I've come across during the course of my work. These are in the author's own words. I was promised to my cousin at the age of 12 or 13. In my strict family, girls weren't valued. I wasn't allowed to have toys or play with friends. Instead, I had to cook, clean, and wash clothes. When I was older, my mum would go through my bags for evidence that I was doing something that might shame the family, and I was accompanied everywhere I went. But I wanted more. I wanted a college education, a career, and a respectful relationship. I loved going to school. It was my only escape. Just before I turned 18, I was taken to Pakistan, and I'd been there for a few weeks when my cousin's family turned up, insisting that my wedding was going to take place there and then. I was absolutely petrified. Now, this didn't take place 2,000 years ago. This is actually, it's published this month in one of the popular women's magazines. The author of that, you'll be able to work out my age now. She was born, she's basically the same age as me. That was actually about what happened to her in 1988. So we're not talking 2,000 years ago. The girl in question now works as a lawyer for the police service in this country. She's a friend of mine. I've met her during the course of my work with victims of forced marriage, and she was born and living in the UK at the time when all of this happened. So what my point is, in short, is that whilst there is a lot to celebrate, and I've spoken about what there is to celebrate already, we're still not as far on as where we should be today. If we look back I've chosen to speak about Lady Fatima. I'm not a religious scholar. I've had to do my research based on help that I've got from family and friends. But if we look back at when Fatima was born, in the Arabian Peninsula at the time, it was often the custom to bury girl daughters alive because they were considered to be a liability and a shame on the family. And it was against this background that the Prophet, peace be upon him, treated his daughter in a fashion which we have observed from our various learned speakers today was an ideal fashion. Fatima has often been referred to and forgive my pronunciation here, I know we have scholars here, but al-Abiha, which is the mother of the father. Now, I think this is wonderful, because what we see here is a child nourishing and teaching the father. Rubab has mentioned how she cleaned her father's face when he had sheep's intestines thrown upon him in the marketplace. She was 5 years old when she did that, and what we saw was a mutual love and respect between father and daughter. And Fatima indeed went on to become the great role model that she is, not being afraid to speak out against injustice. I cannot claim that this is my interpretation, but I was reading a textbook which was written in 1970 by an Iranian feminist, and her take on what happened between the Prophet and his daughter that day is this. She said it was the relationship of the father and the daughter that opened the eyes of the important people and the politicians to the role of woman and the equality of woman. Now, what the point is from this is that whilst we still have gender-based equality in the world, we still have far to go, and we still see a lot of gender-based abuse going on. As Emma has already rightly said, and our leaders of the future that are sitting in the front row, within everyone's sphere of influence, whatever that is, everybody can make a difference. You don't need to be powerful, you don't need to be old or influential to do so. I think the point that I choose to take from the Fatima story is that it is the relationship between the young girl and the father that was so inspirational and, in fact, changed the world. So everyone can play their part. Myself in my life, I'm fortunate enough, as Rubab has been so kind to celebrate with me, I now have representatives within my own family from the 3 Abrahamic traditions. So I get to celebrate a lot of religious festivals in my life. I celebrate Eid, Passover, Hanukkah, Christmas, Easter, the list is endless. And also in the course of my daily work, I'm also honoured to have individuals who represent the other world religions who I work with on a daily basis. All these religions have enriched my life greatly, and I would just like to say it's a great honour for me to be here with such esteemed company today, and thank you to everyone for the contributions that you've made today and also in life, and congratulations to all those of you who've received awards today, and thank you for all your work.
It's very important to remember Bibi Fatima sallallahu alaiha and the example that she gave. It's a peculiar leadership. It's very quiet. She's an integral part of the society in which she lives, without forcing issues. But the one issue she did press was her right to inheritance. I was sent an article in the Daily Telegraph the other day, which solely concentrated upon the difference in inheritance between men and women, between boys and girls. What it didn't say was that in Islamic law, women are guaranteed an inheritance. In English law, they're not guaranteed anything at all on death. If someone dies intestate, the children do not automatically inherit anything, boys or girls. Bibi Fatima sallallahu alaiha stood up for her right to inherit, and this was the right of all women to own a share in society, not to be granted a share by men. And I think it's on details like that that we should concentrate and look at her life as a great champion, not just for women, but for men. Because if women have rights, we have to give them less. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.